you.
Hey, what is up, everybody? It's Dr. Vibe, host and producer of the award-winning Dr. Vibe show, and I'm a certified empowerment coach. And as always, I'd like to say you're blessed, highly favored, and a magnet for miracles and a solution for someone's problem. And we have another friend on the show. I can't call her a guest anymore. She's become a friend. And
thanks.
yeah, we met each other about a year ago. Then we were at a conference together where I had to compete speaking wise with her, which I knew I was going to lose anyways. And then I was telling her, you got to try this thing blab. You got to try this thing blab. And I brought my laptop to the Truth Conference and I showed it, and actually she goes, hey, that's really cool. We got to try that. So we have Eryn-Faye Frans on the line. She is Canada's passion coach. And I'm just going to let her introduce herself because she says she gets so embarrassed when she's in audiences and she's sitting in the front row and they have to embarrass. So I'm going to let her introduce herself so she's comfortable with her intro.
Oh, well, thank you very much. Yeah, but we write these bios, and you never write your own bio, right? You always have somebody who thinks much more highly of you than you think of yourself who writes your bio, and then you have to listen to it when they introduce you, and it's always semi-embarrassing for me. So I'm a coach, so I coach couples all over North America and in Europe. Doing coaching on their relationships. I'm also an author. I have a book out called The Essential Elements of Sex, 9 Secrets to a Life of Intimacy. And then I'm a speaker. So I go around, I do a lot of different workshops, educating people in the area of sexual intimacy.
Wonderful. You know what? Since I'm sure there's a number of people on Blab who are either going to watch us live or the replay. We've had conversations before, but they want to know, how did you become a sex coach? So, so can you, I was going to say educate people how you became a sex coach. I was going to say something else, but I said, oh, it could get a little innuendo here. So how did you become a sex coach?
Do we have a warning on this?
Yes. and by the way, Eryn, one of the many reasons we love Eryn-Faye, she has one of the greatest laughs in the world. I always like to say that. So if you love a rich laugh, you're in the right platform tonight. So let me get back. How did you get into being Canada's passion coach?
Well, I kind of stumbled into it. When I was growing up, I wanted to be a lawyer, so I went to law school, did all of that, got to have a career that way, and then it has a tendency to kind of throw you curveballs. And one of the curveballs that it threw me was when my husband and I had our daughter. It was 53 hours of labor and delivery. It was very painful, totally destroyed my pelvic floor. And the short story is that we ended up in a sexless relationship for about 8 months while I was trying to heal physically after the birth of my daughter. So at that time, Eric, we were very highly involved in our church and our local community. Eric was very well known. He was on radio and TV all the time. And so we just had a profound sense of isolation because we wanted to work on those things, but we didn't know who you could go to talk about this safely. And so that led me to speaking with other women first and then later men and couples about areas of sexual intimacy. And I just did a ton of research. That's my go-to when I get insecure, I research. Did a ton of research and started to learn, had the privilege of being mentored by several very well-known therapists along the way. And as they say, the rest is history. And so now I speak people all over the place.
Absolutely, and she is fantastic at it. So let's get right into the subject tonight, sex education in the public school system. Now, a few months ago when you were on my show, you were telling me you were getting ready to do a tour, and we live in a province, Ontario. So if Americans are watching, you have states, we have provinces. So yes. Eryn is on a tour right now, going throughout Ontario, speaking to parents who have children or young people attending public school about sex education. But what brought this tour about? Because there's some legislation that came into play into this also. So can you give us some background first?
Absolutely. So the curriculum in Ontario, Canada, was the one that they were using prior to this September, was written in '98. So it's very outdated. It's the oldest one in Canada. It obviously doesn't cover issues such as sexting and social media because those things didn't exist back then. So the government of Canada rewrote and updated the said curriculum, and it has caused a firestorm of controversy, primarily in the more conservative faith-based cultures, that it's just too much too fast for their kids. So what I have done is done quite a bit of research on the curriculum itself, and I've just been invited. I mean, you're the one who uses the tour, but it's a pretty hectic speaking
It is a tour,
schedule.
yeah.
So I'm going into, churches, community groups, those sorts of things, people who want to come together and parents who just want to get some good information because they realize they really have a choice. They have the choice to partner with the teachers or just not to participate and pull their kids out of these classes. And they're really agonizing about this decision. And I'm helping them understand, if they're particularly going through with the partnership model, how they can partner with teachers, what is their kids are going to be talked about or taught in schools, and then how they can reinforce that teaching by teaching along with the teachers at home, putting it through their filters, their cultural filters, their faith filters, their belief systems, so that they can really surround the curriculum with the values that they hold as a family.
When you are out on tour, and I'm going to keep on using that. When you're out on tour,
fancy.
I think it's great, man. I think you should brand it the ErynFaye Tour 2015. Got to brand it, ErynFaye. Come on now, you got to brand it. But what are parents' first reaction that you're getting in Ontario when they talk to you about this? Are they informed? Are they misinformed? What is the level of knowledge on the parents' end on the new curriculum?
I would say the primary emotion that I'm getting from parents is fear. They're terrified. They have been fed some misunderstanding, some misinformation. Some of it is that they just ideologically disagree with some of the things that are being rolled out in the curriculum. Some of it is a lack of awareness of what the statistical averages really are out there for kids, what the average kid across Canada is going to be engaging in sexually, relationally at certain ages. Many parents are thinking, oh my goodness, my kid's not going to be involved in that. And so I'm just trying to address those issues with them in a sensitive manner, give them some really good information so that they can make some really wise decisions.
Mm-hmm. What of the people that you've come encountered with, what percentage have a decent, and I use the word loosely, a decent knowledge of this new curriculum?
I think a lot of them understand it or have read it. I would say about 50% have read it. The other 50% have just heard of it, I would say. I believe a much lower percent, maybe 10%, are grasping some of the concepts and the reason for these concepts being put forward. But in fairness, they're showing up at my workshop because they know that they don't know things and they want the education. So what really scares me is the people who don't come to workshops like mine, because the percentages are probably roughly the same. And so there's a huge number of people who just don't know what they need to tackle at what age. I mean, the parents who are in my workshop, they're the heroes, right? Because they're spending a Saturday, a Friday night, they're taking chunks of time out of their precious time in order to really learn so they can be really good parents to their kids through this.
That's great. It's one of those, I guess, syndromes that what you don't know can hurt you.
Oh, very much so. Very much
Absolutely. So. Let's get the background of this, the ErynFaye Tour. I'm going to keep on using it. I know you're going to be mad at me, but I'm going to keep on using it. Where did the concept for this tour come from? Because I always like to see how, when success happens, the background behind it. So when did you start thinking about going out? Because you have a long, wonderful journey in this area. Mm-hmm. But I'm going to leave it at there because I have another conversation piece on that. So let's find out the background behind this first.
Okay. So it's one of those classic situations where you work and you work and you work and you work. I've been doing this for almost 10 years. I've been speaking in churches for about 6-7 years, maybe a little bit longer. And they really do say that, people, it takes a while for people to hear about you. So I've been speaking in churches, I've been writing, I've been doing a whole bunch of things to get myself out there from an educational standpoint. But when the curriculum started to come down the pipe, which was about 6 months to 9 months ago, they really started to let us know that this thing was going to get rolled out over the protests of other parents. That is when I revised the Talking to Your Kids About workshop that I had already written and brushed it up to put all this new information in it. And then pastors started calling me. I mean, just out of the blue. Like I've done very little self-promotion on this, but they know me to be the go-to person when they're talking about sex. You know, I had a pastor, I was doing a premarital course with a whole bunch of couples in this one church. And the pastor began by saying, you know what, I just want to let you know that I drive a car, but I don't teach driver's ed. And I think that's the attitude of a lot of pastors, right? They want an expert to come in and talk about this stuff because they know that it's necessary, but they don't want to touch it with a 10-foot pole themselves.
Wow. How is this? Have you done this sort of teaching targeted to teenagers before? Because I know the majority of the time that you've been coaching in this area has been for adults. Have you done a lot of this for teenagers?
I haven't done a lot, but I have done some. I've gone into youth groups for. I've also talked to a lot of university students. And so I have done a little bit, but primarily right now, my aim is to really equip parents so that we can change around the culture that we currently have around sexual intimacy. Because in the culture of parents, our demographic, it's still largely taboo, and yet we're raising a generation where it's a very fluid language to them because they see it all around them and they just know what's out there, and it's talked about on the playground with higher level of awareness and knowledge than we did when we were on the playground at school and growing up in elementary school. So primarily my target right now is just equipping parents so that they can speak the right language to their kids and help their kids along. Now,
how is this been different than what you do in church, in a church session? Is it any, or is there a difference? Because
like them working with couples, you mean?
Yeah, like because this is to me, for you, this is a different dynamic a little bit than, you know, straight couples, and you're sharing with groups of parents or groups of adults now, so it's almost like group coaching.
It is, and it's been fantastic because anytime you teach to groups of couples, there's always a ton of shame that's lying over them. Like I can't even get them to ask questions out loud most often. They have to text me questions, email me questions so they can answer them because they're painfully aware that this is happening within their relationship. And so they're very sensitive to how the information is disseminated. When I'm teaching parents, it's that one step removed, right? Because it's not about directly their own sexual, relationships, their own intimacy, their own sexuality. It's about how we frame this for our kids. And so they are much more open to ask questions, to be super candid. I was at a congregation just last weekend out in Ottawa, had over 60 families there from tons of different cultures. And one of the biggest things that certain people said was, you know what, we just need to learn the language. We don't even know what some of this stuff is because, we just came over. English as a second language it's a barrier for us. And so their takeaway was we just have to get a dictionary and we have to sit down and we have to learn what this stuff is, much less how to then roll it out to our kids. So there
you bring up a very interesting conversation piece of congregation. I'm thinking about church conversation piece in the fact, how are you managing bringing this message to different cultures? Because for those who don't know a lot about Ontario, especially in the area of the Greater Toronto area, it's a very diverse, multicultural
extremely so
area,
which is one of the reasons why I love living here. Like I adore that part of it, but it does present a challenge without a doubt when you're talking to people. So I had Middle Eastern, I had African, I had Southeast Asian, I had Chinese in my session last week, and you just have to go in with humble attitude, knowing that you don't know everything. Like I've learned a lot about these cultures because I've spoken with them so much. I've done a lot of work in particular with the Chinese culture, done numerous workshops over the years with those churches and those groups of people. But you're not going to know everything because you don't live in the culture. So when you're humble and you just go in low and you say, you know what, I'm obviously presenting it from one perspective. I welcome your input. I welcome your insight. Then they feel very comfortable to come forward and say, oh, you know what, in our culture, things are kind of like this. And, you know, public displays of affection are very difficult. So how do we demonstrate for our kids that we're really truly in love with each other? And then you can address those things, and you can say, you know what, that's a great point. So how can you do a work that's respectful to your culture, but still really demonstrating to your kids, I adore your mom, I adore your dad.
Wow, I'd be fascinated to see you do when you have to do a presentation. It's a mosaic of parents.
It's fantastic. It's that favorite type. It really is, because I really believe that if all different cultures come together and we share our life experiences, we learn so much and we grow so much. So that's my favorite format for sure.
Wonderful, wonderful. Have you had any aggressive pushback during any of your sessions? And I'll put that kindly.
You know what? It's funny. I got that question for the first time just a few weeks ago. In fact, I think it was at the conference that you and I were teaching at. And it's really funny, because when I began 10 years ago, I would have people who invite me in to speak and then say, we love you, we want you back, but don't tell anyone you were here. Because it was just so unspoken about the things that I was talking about in my workshop. But I have not had that experience in the last several years. So either they're too afraid to confront me face to face and they just talk badly behind my back, or they're really starting to understand, look, this is something we've got to tackle head on, and they're really willing to bite the bullet, so to speak, and do it. So I have been very fortunate that if there is pushback, I don't hear about it, which is lovely.
Cool. Congratulations. That's great. During the tour, are you getting any chance to interact with teenagers?
Actually have a seminar coming up here fairly soon in November, where I'm going to be doing some work with a youth group.
I would be very interested. I'd love to be a fly on the wall on that one. That should be very interesting. So when and I'd like you, if you're giving an overview from what you've experienced so far, what concerns do the parents have? Not only with the legislation on Ontario, but what have you encountered over your journey, parents' concerns when it comes to their young people and sexual education or sexuality in general?
Okay. There seems to be a really wide-held misconception that if we talk candidly about the ins and outs, ups and downs of sex with our children, that they will just want to go out dancing naked in the moonlight and just get it on with everybody who comes along their way, right? There is this perception. Fortunately, the research time and time again refutes this and says when we talk to our kids about sex education in a comprehensive way. Obviously, you know, a lot of parents want abstinence for their kids, no matter what background they come from. But if we talk about that, encourage that, but then also say, understanding that a lot of teenagers are having sex. So here's all the ways that we can keep you safe. Here's different things that you need to think about for the emotional impact of having a relationship of this nature. The kids are much more likely to delay having sex, and when they do so, they're much safer about their approach to it.
You know what? We have someone joining in at Teen Falcon 13. Unfortunately, your internet signal isn't. Oh, wow. We've got two people. I got Eryn-Faye and Teen Falcon on audio, but Teen Falcon, are you there? Okay, he's not. Are you there, Teen Falcon? Okay. Eryn, are you still there?
I'm still here.
Yeah, okay. You've just gone to audio only because of internet signal, but that's no problem. We'll continue the conversation. I'm speaking that it's going to come back. But yeah, so are you excited to be presenting or doing what you share in front of teenagers? And have you done it before, or has it been a while since you've done that? It's
been a while since I've done it. It's been about a year and a half. But I'm comfortable with teenagers because I really believe that they have a lot of questions to ask. And so typically when I go into this group, I have fewer talking points and more places to invite them to ask questions. I'll ask them to send me questions ahead of time via email, encouraging them that it's confidential. And then I'll build a talk around what it is they want to ask, because they think about this stuff a lot. They have a lot of questions, and I would much rather be answering what they actually are about than just blabbing away, so to speak, on
Yeah, there you go. Compare the parents of the faith communities that you deal with on this subject versus the ones that are either non-faith or not of Christian background. Are there any differences in their thoughts, or is it basically the same? They just have huge concerns and maybe some huge misconceptions.
You know, I think parents across the board are generally concerned, because I have a group that I work with. We have 5 daughters and 5 moms, and we have come together. We meet every other month with the girls. We have a real fun social time, and then we just have some hard-hitting questions and topics that we tackle, mostly led by the girls. They're the ones who bring them up and say, you know what, really want to talk about how we have friendships and backbiting and all these nasty things that can go on for girls our age. So they bring up the topics, and we just agree to talk about them. And there is still, even though they're not from faith backgrounds or even necessarily conservative cultures, there's still a hesitancy to really deal with sex head on. They always look at me and say, you're on for this one. You get to lead the seminar for this. And I have no problem, you know, talking to the girls about these sorts of things. So I think parents across the boards are really ambiguous about how to talk to their kids. They struggle with the right language. They struggle with knowing what to say and whether it's too much or too little. They struggle with, how do I actually bring up a question? You know, I hear numerous stories of people who, for example, have a kid who burst into tears in the back of the car, was one story. And it turned out he had been exposed to some porn. I think the kid was like 6 or 7 at the time. And the dad didn't have a clue how to deal with it, and just kind of just let it sit and say, you know, it's okay, buddy, rather than going in and really unpacking what this kid had seen and why it was bothersome to the kid and how he can protect himself. And it's okay to come and talk to us anytime you see these scary images online, because we want to know. You won't get in trouble for stumbling into this. We just want to know. And so I think it doesn't really matter whether you're from a faith background or not. You're going to have a level of nervousness talking to your own kid about this stuff.
Yeah, great sharing there. Fantastic sharing. How, and you, most of your time you're spending in the faith community, how has their, I guess, thought process or the willingness for them to address this issue, has it moved in the forward direction since you've gotten started being a coach dealing with this area?
Oh, without a doubt, because I think across the boards when it comes to the area of sexuality, well, I think two things. First off, I think they're starting to realize that you don't have to choice, because these issues are crying up right in center. You know, the symptoms of studying this stuff down and not talking about it, you have it down all day long, it's going to creep out someplace. And so I think they're seeing the symptoms of that and realizing, you know, we got to address it at the root. We got to be talking about this more. So there is a sense of it's time. But I think also there's a lot of people in the faith community who are also stepping out and just being willing to address this stuff straight up, and using different language than we used 20 years ago too, which I find much more helpful for people today.
I think, and on one of our previous conversations too, I think one of the keys you're seeing about advance in this area is that you're seeing more younger and younger pastors.
No, that is correct. Absolutely. And the younger generation, without a doubt, is more comfortable with it. Not always, not across the boards, but by and large, they are more comfortable, and they're open to at least have somebody like me come in and talk to them, to the group.
Okay. I always like celebrating success, so I'd like you to share either 1 or 2 special moments from the tour so far.
Oh, okay. You know what, when, and this is general, this isn't a specific memory of one person. Well, you know, no, I will. I'll share one. Had a woman come to me after one workshop. I was doing just a little brief glimpse of my talking to kids about sex workshop. So just an hour. It's a 3.5 hour workshop typically. And she came up to me afterwards, and she was just absolutely in tears because her daughter was 19. She was Chinese, so she felt a real sense of shame around the issue. And she said, you know what, I don't have a clue how to talk about stuff, and I'm really afraid that my 19-year-old daughter knows way more than I do anyways, and what can I do? And I said the thing that is most important in these situations is to be authentic with your kids, because your kids know that you don't know much about this, right? There's no use in trying to pretend that you suddenly became an expert walking out of a one-hour workshop. That's just ridiculous. But if you go to her and you say, you know, Annie, I am so concerned that you walk through these issues carefully, because I know that your dad left when you were a little girl, and I know that it's been a real hard thing for you to not have a guy who really loves you and takes care of you well. And just come at it from a perspective of love. Don't worry about language being perfect. Don't worry about having to say the perfect thing or give the perfect advice, but just come alongside her and say, you know what, I know that your struggle is real. I'm concerned about you. I want you to be really careful when you go out into the world and make the decisions that you're making. And the look of relief on this woman's face, I mean, it just looked like there had been a huge, weight that was lifted off her shoulder. And I think that is one thing that I tell parents time and time again. It's not about being perfect. It's about being authentic with your kids. And if you get challenged with a question that you don't know the answer to, or a story that comes out of left field and you don't have a clue how to address it, just being able to say, you know what you're saying is important. I believe it's in its importance, but I don't have a really good answer for you. Why don't we research it together? Why don't you give me time to research it and then I'll come back? I don't want to neglect you. Shoving your conversation to the side is important. It's just that I need you to know that I'm learning alongside of you in some of these issues as well, because I didn't have to deal with this stuff when I was a kid. And I think that takes a lot of the pressure off of parents and give them permission to be authentic.
And it's interesting because the last few times we've been on the show together, two words you've used over and over again, and I want you to talk about it when it comes to this subject, is shame and authenticity. How key is it in this area that you're sharing with us tonight, sex education in the public school system and sex education with parents and their children who will soon be adults?
Yeah. Well, I mean, one of the big, I talk a lot in my workshops about having a filter, and your filter is like a pair of binoculars through which you see the world, and they're comprised of your beliefs and your ethics or your values. And so I have them analyze their own beliefs and values, first off, and then I suggest some things that I know from the research are really healthy beliefs and values to hold. And one of the things that is a huge belief that we need to understand about ourselves is that shame distorts sex. And a lot of us have shame filters through which we view sex and intimacy and getting naked in front of each other and all of these issues that intersect with the act itself. And I say to them, look, here's the deal. Unless you do that shame work yourself in your own life and really look at those issues and become self-aware, they're just going to crop up, and you're going to filter that stuff to your kids, whether you know it or not. So it's a real opportunity for parents to go, you know what, it's time for me to start working on me as well as communicating this to my kids. Because, I mean, the data is very clear that if you have shame about the issue of sex, you're not going to like it very much. It's not going to be enjoyable. You're going to be in the middle of it thinking, oh my gosh, I look horrible. I can't believe I'm this fat. All these negative cognition, that you'll have running through your head. And that does make it fun. So we need to make sure that we get that stuff out of the way so that we can truly enjoy it.
And it's an interesting point you bring up too, because if young people have this when they're young and it isn't broken, for a lack of a better term, they carry it on into adulthood, and it becomes
absolutely.
even more, and it becomes more difficult to break that cycle, so to speak.
Agreed. It's the hardest, hands down, the most difficult issue that I have to deal with when I'm coaching couples is shame.
You're kidding.
Because you can teach anyone technique, right?
Yeah.
You can teach anyone technique. You can educate anybody. That's difficult. You just have to know a few things, you know. But shame, that's a lot of work.
Yeah, yeah. Getting back to the tour, what has been the education system's response to what you're doing?
Oh, I think they're fairly open, but anybody who's coming alongside saying, hey, parents, let's work together with the teachers, let's partner with the teachers, they're just thrilled to hear, quite frankly, because they've heard so much controversy from other people. So they're pleased. They're very pleased. Yeah, so I've been blessed with that.
Good, good. Has there been anything that you've found out about that you did not know before you went out on the tour? Whether for parents or for young people, if there's anything that, because you do a lot of research and you've done this for a while, yeah. Has there been anything new that has popped up that you did not know or you come as a surprise?
You know what, I haven't. I'm thankful for that, I suppose. Although when you learn new things, it's always an opportunity to educate yourself further. So I'm not opposed to that in any way, shape, or form. But the curriculum's very clear, and I'm quite used to the sorts of questions that people ask around the subject as a whole. So I haven't been off guard.
Okay. The curriculum itself, do you feel there's anything that needs to be changed with what the curriculum is offered? Do you think, or anything that needs to be added, anything that needs to be taken back? Is it the right curriculum for the right time?
Ooh, great question. Great question. Here's what I tell parents. I say that according to statistics, the curriculum is being rolled out in an age-appropriate manner. Understanding that not all school systems, not all school communities, not all people, not all students are statistically average. So the curriculum might actually hit some kids a little bit late. They might have needed this information a year or two prior to when they get it. On the other hand, some communities might be incredibly conservative and this stuff hasn't even started to cross their kids' radar. So that's really where I encourage parents to work with the teachers and go in and say, how are you going to roll this out? How are you going to teach this? Could I take a look at the worksheets that you're going to hand out before you hand them out? Just so that I can help support my kid, particularly if my kid is one of those kids who this is going to be just like deer in the headlights because this stuff is brand new to them, then I can help them cross the bridge. But I think that's just education, right? Because you have kids of all different levels on any academic subject. This isn't going to be any different. And I think by and large, the ages that they're rolling this stuff out is very healthy, very healthy. One thing just to add to that without going on too long, one thing that I love about this curriculum is that they are really building a solid sense from very young age of what healthy relationships look like and what abusive relationships look like, and really helping kids have a voice to say no thanks if something makes them feel uncomfortable. And I think this is something that is so incredibly valuable. When I was growing up as a kid, they kind of the stranger danger talk. Remember that?
Right.
Probably about the same age I'm son. And stranger danger was a big deal. Well, 90% of kids know they're abusers. So stranger danger only works for 10%. I mean, it's just a ludicrous how skewed it is. And so I think there is much more validity to teaching our kids, you know what, if you've got a bad gut level feeling about something, or if somebody is making you feel worthless, or somebody is hurting you in some way, you need to get yourself out of the situation, and giving them the tools, the language, the courage to remove themselves from that situation so they can keep themselves safe when we're not around to watch over them. And I think the school, the curriculum does a very good job of building year after year after year after year. So by the time they get to high school and they're engaged in relationships, they have a much better chance of having really healthy relationships than currently what they're being taught.
I want to, just before we go on, I want to shout out to Ms. Tiffany Denise and also the Kurt and Jessica show for joining. So if you have any questions, and or comments, there's an open seat. But I didn't, and I feel bad here. What are some of the key parts of this Ontario curriculum when it comes to sex education? Because we make an assumption everyone knows, but what are some of the key points of this new curriculum?
Okay, So I'll touch on some of the things that have been a little controversial for parents. In grade 1, which is about 6 years old, teaching kids very specific terms for genitalia. And so some parents are a little bit nervous that vulva, for example, will be brought up, or clitoris will be brought up. That is one thing that's a little controversial. What I say to parents in answer to that is, you know what, every social worker that I know really says and comes to me, says, please give your kids a voice, please teach your kids proper names, all of the names, so that if, God forbid, something awful happens to your kids, you can very clearly identify what happened to them. They can speak up so that we can remove the perpetrator from this child's life. So that is somewhat of a comfort to parents. And when they say things like, well, why do they need to know what the clitoris is? I say, you know what, we just teach all body parts. And the thing is that we know what that's for. They don't know at that age. And so we need to be really, really careful that we don't take our adult knowledge as parents and put it over what our kids are being taught, because they're not going to read it through that filter. They're just like, okay, this is what this body part's called, and move on, if they even absorb it at that age, quite frankly. So then when we move into grade 3, they're talking about different types of families, being, you know, grandparents, being in the parental role, the guardian role, two mommies, two daddies, you know, mommy and daddy, single parent households, aunties, uncles, all of these things are talking about it and how it is important to embrace the value of different kids who come from different types of families. And I think there's some conservative parents who are very concerned because they struggle with the concept of equal marriage. And so, but my encouragement to them is to say, look, even if you disagree ideologically with this, we live in a country where it's legal, it's been legal for 10 years, and we really have a value of inclusiveness in Canada. Even if you're different than me, even if you have different perspectives on a whole range of things, I can live close to you, and I don't have to believe what you believe, and you don't have to believe what I believe, but we have to respect each other. We have to honor each other for our differences and perspectives. I think if we can put it in that sort of framework and understand that this is just how we're good neighbors to each other in every issue, this just happens to be one, I think it eases people's anxiety a little bit. Then we roll on. I don't want to just talk indefinitely, but there's a whole bunch of other stuff. I can get more specific if you want, or we can stop.
No, go ahead, because you know what? As you're sharing, more people are joining the blab. So something's hot that you're sharing. So certainly share some more if you can.
Okay. So then in grade 4, grade 5, they're starting to talk about special feelings quite a bit. And some parents are like, pushing into relationships too soon. And the fact of the matter is, no. I mean, kids have special feelings for each other in very early grades. I mean, I always kind of half ashamedly, half proudly say I grabbed a boy in kindergarten and kissed him. Like, and this was, too many years ago to identify. Like, kids know what special feelings are from a very young age. And what we're just saying to them is that this is normal. And this is understandable. And this is a real opportunity for us to couch it in terms of respect. How do we treat people with respect? How do we build really good friendships with people? Because even if you do have a crush on someone, you better darn tootin' be a good friend with them. Otherwise, the relationship's not going to go very far.
Right.
So that eases kind of some anxiety for parents as well. And then the next big controversial time is in grade 6. And talk about masturbation. They talk about it in the context of, most people do it. I tend to follow along the beliefs that, 99% of people do it, and when the other 1% lie. I think so. Having a candid talk and just talking to the physical and medical realities of this with your kids, and this is fairly normal. This is fairly common. But that's tough for some parents. How do we handle that? How do we deal with that? Is this okay? Is this not okay? And really, as I was talking about earlier, your own belief system acts as a filter. You need to be looking at this belief system. So, for example, in one of my workshops, I had this woman say, you know what? I've totally had this aha moment that I've always thought that it was dirty, awful, and wrong for little girls to masturbate. It was just, you know what guys do, what boys do. And she said, I'm realizing my adult value system is about gender equity. And so I either need to believe it's great for both or not great for both. This saying it's okay for one, not for the other, isn't going to work well. And just for her to come to that own realization that her latent passive belief system was coming through in a way that would probably be unhealthy given the fact that she had a boy and a girl, and recognizing that enough so that she could communicate much more clearly with us.
All right. Well, you know what? I know that you have only a certain amount of time because you have a wonderful husband and a wonderful daughter who I both met a few weeks ago. So I don't want to take up too much of your time. But as always, I'd like to thank you for sharing with us as always. And you know, we always want you back. So we're going to be asking right now. We're putting out there. We're going to need you back, hopefully before the end of the year. But any closing thoughts you'd like to share with our audience when it comes to this subject of sex education in the public school system?
Yeah, I really believe it is not something to be scared about. It's something you know to figure out what your kids are doing, and then how to learn the subject more, because that whether like it or not, kids are facing. So it is more in your kid world, or at least touching their world, and yourself, and really understand that research is very clear that when parents talk to their kids thoroughly about this subject, kids are much wiser when it comes to making decisions, and so play an important role in the lives of kids. We don't ever want to minimize it. Sometimes we abdicate it to the peers because we think they don't want to listen to us anymore. But the fact of the matter is they are listening to us. So we need to keep having these conversations with them as we learn more ourselves.
Wonderful. If people want to get in touch with you, how can they do that?
They can do it through my website. It's www.ErynFaye.com. It's ErynFaye. A little bit of weird spelling, but just like my Twitter handle, ErynFaye.com.
Excellent. So after the tour, what is up next?
Christmas time, and I'm going to take a good long break, and then I start again in January. So I'm taking several weeks off in December just to really kick back and hang out with my family.
Cool. I know recently we had you on this show, and you're saying another book is in the making. Is it still on course?
It is. It is. I'm a tremendously slow writer. It's much to my shame. I just struggle. I'd much rather be talking to people than sitting behind a computer typing. You know, I'm too extroverted to write very fast. So it's coming along. It's probably about 75% done, and I just have to get it across the finish line so that I can get it out there.
Wonderful. We're looking forward to that. And you know that when that book's out, you're coming on the show to talk about it. You know that already, right?
Thank you.
All right.
Absolutely.
My pleasure. Absolutely. Hey, it's Dr. Vibe here. I am your host and producer of the award-winning Dr. Vibe show. I'm also a certified empowerment coach for men and those who love them. And as always, I'd like to say you can catch me on the Dr. Vibe show. You can catch me at the Good Men Project. We're working on getting the Good Men Project to get on Blab, because if ErynFaye is on Blab, the Good Men Project needs to be on Blab. And there's the laugh. So as always, I'd like to thank everyone who stopped by. Tiffany Denise, Daryl D.R. White, Kurt and Jessica, thank you so much. Really appreciate you watching. Watch the replay, share the replay. As always, you're blessed and highly favored. You're a magnet for miracles and your solution for someone's problem. God bless. Peace be well. Keep the